What's up, Gires? How have you been? Welcome to everyone watching us live. Also, hey, we were just chatting for a few minutes before starting the talk, right? I don't like to call it an interview, but rather it's a talk, a conversation about what's going on in the world here with Gires. Honestly, I think this is the first time we don't know where to begin.
There are too many topics. First of all, I'm always happy to be here with you, with the community. Greetings to everyone. Before we even started, we nearly did another show and spent about an hour and just listing the topics. Extremely complicated. I think we've had a very intense week, a week full of news, both in the country and in regional matters in Latin America. Of course, now the topic of Alaska. Between this meeting that's going to happen, for us, there could already be lots of news. By the time you're watching us, when this is being broadcast.
Exactly. Well, just a clarification there for Gires is right to mention it because it's the 8:57 in the morning when we're recording this, but it's usually broadcast in the afternoon. That's usually the schedule. We'll try to broadcast it as early as possible. We don't know how the Alaska situation will turn out, but by the time you watch this, you'll already know. All right.
Because some interesting things have come out of many of those meetings. The real substance often isn't what they tell you. I mean, because you always have to break the patterns we bring about how we're going to have the conversation. I think I don't really expect anything to happen.
That's the current situation. That Trump spoke with Zelensky moments before. The fact that it's published that he spoke before seems like a sign to me, like telling Putin, well, I mean, we're not going to completely turn our backs on Ukraine. Do you know who else he talked to that caught my attention? Did they just report about Lukashenko? The fact that he spoke with Lukashenko really caught my attention because, well, in the end, that's how it is. He's just a puppet of Putin, although I've always believed he's more than just a puppet. I mean, he's very clever, of course. He can't just turn his back on Putin, and that's it. But I do think Lukashenko acts on his own sometimes, right?
That might also signal balance. Speaking, I mean, saying, let's see, okay, I talked to Zelensky, but I also talked to a partner very close to Putin to send a message. I'm neutral, I'm seeking neutrality. I talk to everyone completely. It's going to be a day, extremely newsworthy day. I think all week everyone has been turning their eyes to this. But while we turn to look at this meeting, this summit in search of a possible peace agreement or a ceasefire or some commercial negotiation, or whatever it ends up being, the whole region is in total turmoil. I mean, Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, Brazil, Peru,
Haiti, Venezuela. Yes, it's tremendous. I mean, there are several topics there. In Latin America, you can travel north to south as you like. But the most recent thing since we were talking about Trump is this shipment, because we didn't get to that last Friday, this shipment of 26, I think it's 28, but I'm not sure how many cartel leaders. Latuta was there. I had forgotten about him and the others. They send them to the United States, but also on the same day, they arrest 26 cartel members, 27 cartel members.
A generation in Aguascalientes.
Come on. I mean, there was a lot. There was a lot of action with drugs. A United States drone in the state of Mexico flying around there with a report. We have to remember that the same thing happened over there too, towards Sonora, Sinaloa. No, but here in Baja California from the Pacific Ocean, exactly the Pacific in general, right? There was a plane around there, but then several important movements started happening there, even from politicians, right? You mean the canceled visas and everything?
Yesterday, the visa was canceled for the mayor of Mexicali, the capital of Baja California, a mayor appointed by Marina del Pilar. She's a lady, I mean, so without offending, she's a theater actress. They make her mayor. and she's a lady who doesn't lift a finger, she doesn't move a single finger. Sorry, if she doesn't have the governor's authorization, the mayor's cabinet belongs to the governor. I mean, literally, she's Marina del Pilar's Lukashenko. And the day of yesterday, the news broke through the Weekly Z that his visa has already been revoked. Also, just on the day that Marina del Pilar starts making statements in Mexico City saying that they're going to give the visa back, I mean...
But do you think they're really going to give it back to her?
Look, I don't have any idea. It's very complicated because there are very mixed signals from the United States toward Mexico. On one hand, Donald Trump claims Mexico does what he wants, but those are his typical boastful statements. But are you seeing a drone flying in the state of Mexico? And then comes the arrest of the former director of Pemex, which is said to be, according to Mexico, because of the Odebrecht case.
Corruption or not corruption? They said yes, yes.
That's how it is. And what if the United States really arrested him because of bilateral cooperation between Mexico and the United States and is going to extradite him to Mexico? For me, this would very likely mark a sign of reconciliation between both governments and would be a show of peace, friendship, and cooperation, now truly from the United States.
Yes.
The person's lawyer says no, he has a migration issue and is requesting political asylum in the United States. And given that the investigation by the prosecutor's office is based on the statements of Emilio Lozoya, but without any evidence beyond his own statement. I mean, look, a lot of things are happening.
A lot of things. Well, quickly then, let's see. This operation in Mexico takes place. These groups are sent. A lot of people are arrested. The decrease in homicides is significant, about 25%. Fewer homicides, although, well, the numbers might also be a bit manipulated, but at least it feels like something is being done.
I'll set the numbers aside for now, since they can be easily manipulated and aren't as meaningful to me. Especially now without independent bodies
That are
analyzing the figures. One thing is undeniable. There's clearly a change in strategy. Second, there have been operations against government entities. So far, it's only been in municipalities, but that's something that didn't happen before. The arrests in Chiapas and those that have occurred
throughout Mexico against police from the
police and city council members, that's progress never seen before in Mexico.
No, not anymore.
We hadn't seen anything like this in years unless it involved political enemies.
Not me.
I'm not necessarily referring to partisans because it can also happen internally or when the municipalities are very small or actions that end up being insignificant since we're discussing operations that are well structured and organized. The number of arrests published by the Public Security Secretariat is also extremely high. There are controversies for many reasons. Where would you keep them? You can't discuss that many arrests. We'll have to see, but either way, if we're seeing actions, could we say, oh, it's because of pressure from the United States? Or, oh, is it Claudia Sheinbaum and a change? Either way.
The point is it's happening.
It's happening.
It's happening. And that's also been urgent because in the end, there's a whole strategy from Trump to try to hit Canada and Mexico until the security issue is resolved. Basically, it was the first executive order he made, which was about border security. It's a militarized border on both the United States and Mexican sides. There are details.
Or issues that go unnoticed precisely because of so much news or the media impact generated by the headline. We often miss the fine print. I'm not criticizing, it's the opposite. The argument for expulsion was that it wasn't extradition. Of these new 26 high-ranking drug trafficking figures, there are 55 in total. Yes, these people were already detained in Mexico. Extradition isn't exactly a trial, as the Secretary of Foreign Affairs decides, though it does involve a judge. They are given the opportunity. The detainee is notified so that they can file an injunction and defend themselves in court against the extradition. For extradition to take place, the crime must exist and be recognized in both countries. It's a judicial and administrative procedure. There might be a minor controversy, but that's not important. Here we're talking about expulsion. Expulsion doesn't exist as a legal concept because it's an expulsion, because you literally grab them, put them on a plane, and send them off just like that. There isn't a procedure in the strict sense, it's illegal. So what reason does the Public Security Secretariat give to the prosecutor's office? Do they use the security law in Article 5? If not, I don't recall anything that would justify it. But they tell you that it's a matter of national security, and they tell you it's because they're still operating inside the prisons. Let me see, I want to understand myself a little. Courage, and I acknowledge that they admit
that
drug traffickers operate inside the prisons, inside the jails. Let me go back. How the hell do they operate? And how is it allowed that drug traffickers and other criminals keep operating inside the prisons? Look, what you should do is ask, they operate, so be careful. The one who has just been appointed and confirmed by the Senate as the head of the Financial Intelligence Unit replacing Pablo Gomez is the one who was in charge of the prisons. So are you telling me that this guy was allowing drug trafficking to operate inside the prisons? And now he's going to be the head of the Financial Intelligence Unit. I don't know if he's the best fit. I didn't know him, but I know his position. I know the situation with the Cerezos is extremely complicated. Right now in Veracruz, they just killed the director of the Cerezos. And this is a constant. It's a very complicated position by nature, but at least it's being acknowledged that there's a big problem there. I hope it doesn't end at admitting, yes, the narcos control the prisons, but that the government actually acts.
something. Hey, Jere, since we're on that topic and we're going to move forward territorially, right? In the Caribbean, this is my breakfast. Enjoy.
Enjoy. I'm here with my little coffee.
In the Caribbean, well, it's reported anonymously, it's leaked, although I think they leak it on purpose. Where United States military personnel give information to American media, to United States media, and tell them, hey, we're going to be operating. Now, in the Caribbean, there's an operation where United States air and naval troops are deployed in the Southern Caribbean. This was later confirmed by Marco Rubio, as it was initially unknown and surprising. And basically, well, they're closing in. I mean, it started with Mexico, but they're closing in from the Caribbean, which is where a lot of that passes through.
Drugs and
All that. And also people. So they're closing in, let's say, on the strategy. It's in the Caribbean now too, right? So
we need to go back a bit to the statements made by the United States prosecutor Pam Bondi regarding Nicolas Maduro as the leader of the Cartel of the Suns, using Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico as an air bridge in exchange for money. She just stated that. We need to go back to last week's New York Times leak, where they say that authorization has already been granted and that the authorization is already signed for United States military personnel to operate in Latin America against drug cartels. Here, pay attention, and I say this as a Mexican, that everything is heading south. That Claudia Sheinbaum is working and managing her agreements, even if it means that drones come here and take away 100 or 1,200 drug traffickers, whatever it takes, but hopefully the issue won't be here because of the danger it represents. I understand that the situation in Venezuela is extremely complex. It seems to me that Maduro is an indefensible character no matter how you look at it. I don't have any. I have no doubt that he is indeed connected to organized crime, that he is either a leader or an accomplice or has a very close involvement with drug trafficking. Is it an indicator?
since we're already going that way, several points there. One that is clearly pointing towards Maduro, towards going against him. Now, it is being said directly that he is the leader of a cartel. In a more money is being offered, as we saw last week. This same week, $700 million was seized from him. You can triple the reward and pay from there, right? Exactly. Luxury cars, luxury properties, yachts, and so on too. So have you seen any reaction from Scheinbaum about it? Or from everyone? Look, they're quiet because you know how it used to be before. They came out to defend him. When that happens, I said, just as long as Mexican politicians don't come out to defend Maduro.
A concern, I have a concern. The fact that Scheinbaum has remained silent has been very important, and I think it's extremely positive for Mexico to begin with, for any government, even if it's left-wing, in fact, especially if it's left-wing. Supporting a dictator like Maduro is a liability.
That's part of it. It doesn't make me forget. You know what else? He still isn't saying anything. The thing about Israel, because she's of Jewish origin, it's a topic that was mentioned several times at first. There were even some tensions with Israel. And right now, with everything that's happening, even issues like famine and all that, look at Mexico. There's a comment
that was made, and honestly, I think it was very appropriate. Yes, which is the topic of refugees. Historically, Mexico has always been a country that receives refugees, regardless of the reason.
Yes, sir.
And that Mexico remains open in that sense. I think it's perfect, especially when it comes to children.
Yes, I
think it's perfect. And that's a very appropriate position since it didn't address the topic directly, criticizing, attacking, or taking sides. Simply the humanitarian aspect. We must always distinguish between civilians and the parties directly involved in any conflict, such as terrorist groups, drug traffickers, or armies. And this part that Mexico has always had this history. We've taken in refugees from around the world. It's good to see that stance since serenity has been maintained without any abruptness.
Otherwise,
in the Senate, remember, the Senate handles international relations. The Senate has just approved an agreement promoted by the board of directors. Partido Acción Nacional, Partido Revolucionario Institucional, and Movimiento Ciudadano refused to vote for it as presented, citing that argument. I think Cineroña did well to acknowledge that this was a statement that was drafted by Morena's board of directors and not shared with other political parties. And in that statement, what Israel is doing is referred to and called genocide. Israel is condemned for genocide. It's a very strong statement, and the Palestinian state is recognized. To clarify, it's not officially recognized, though the Senate could make it so. It's a statement, but it is very symbolic, or if it's very strong, for the Senate to be the one issuing a statement in the terms in which they did. A statement condemning any massacre is right from a humanitarian view. Any statement on the issue of receiving political asylum seekers seems correct to me. But if you take a side, talk about recognizing the state of Palestine, talk about condemning the genocide caused by Israel, then that's already a political stance, and the Senate is the one who should do it. Let me link that a little bit with this possible or probable internal war within Morena. The things that Claudia Sheinbaum is doing well, is it Morena itself that's tripping her up? The biggest opposition right now is Morena. They're fighting among themselves. And these kinds of situations make the United States bilateral relationship much harder. I mean, this is not the time to take stances that complicate an already difficult relationship like the one Mexico is experiencing. Or if you're going to do it, coordinate with the president and be on the same page. It's not about one person pulling one way and the other pulling the other way. I mean, the lack of unity is being seen in Morena, not even in the opposition. In fact, I think the opposition has stayed much more in line with the president herself on international issues for a logical reason, not because of affinities, the opposition governors themselves because they are in tune with Claudia Sheinbaum's discourse in bilateral action. Well, because they are affected and the relationship breaks down. I mean, because their states are also the ones that are affected. I mean, the issue of tariffs wouldn't just affect Sheinbaum, it would affect all Mexicans.
I think that
They have had it very prudent. And the ones who have been reckless are people like Norona, like Monreal, like Dan Augusto, even Gutierrez Luna with statements like that.
And then we were just now talking about this whole Maduro thing and all that. And lately, Petro, who wanted to position himself, also talking about Colombia and what's happening over there, Petro wanted to position himself as someone critical of Maduro. You might remember that he even said at the beginning of
the rigged election last year, right?
He called it a fraudulent election and so on. It seemed like the relationship between Maduro and Petro had broken off. And now they're, well, once again, buddies and friends. And whatever you want to say, well, that's it. It's interesting now with this idea of having a shared border zone where they're going to do exchanges. And I don't know what else. The most dangerous area known for growing cocaine and other things, that's where they'll be betting now, I think. Kind of avenue like that, a highway like that, really big and all, you say, what's going on? Why did Petro change? Or was he always the same and just wanted to mislead people temporarily? Petro is on his way out now, don't you think? Next year there's an election. What do you think? Take Miguel Uribe Turbe's case, right? The way he handled it? Terrible. I mean,
look, Petro, I feel a bit bad saying this as a foreigner and with all respect to Colombians, but I'm starting to believe Petro, if he has mental or other issues, or if anyone truly cares about, loves, wants, or supports his success, take away his cell phone since he acts like an idiot on Twitter. I mean, look, first, the case of Senator and pre-candidate Miguel Uribe. We have to remember a few months ago, he suffered an attack where he was shot in the head. Colombia, like many Latin American countries, is experiencing very extreme polarization. And on one hand, some blame the government, while on the other hand, others said it was a self-inflicted attack. It seemed that Miguel Uribe was going to make it, that he was going to be able to recover. He spent a long time in intensive care. Sadly, he died this week. The first thing that caught my attention, and we talked about it that morning, was the silence that Petro had kept, that he hadn't sent a message. Anyway, regardless of political positions, it's the death of a very important figure, a senator who was also a presidential pre-candidate. Even if their positions were opposed, I would still expect something from a head of state. Well, some words of condolence, maybe very brief, maybe very sober, but at least to say, hey, our thoughts are with the family, our condolences, we're with you. That's politics, I guess. What does Petro do when he finally responds? That he's going to sue anyone who claims that he's involved. His government is involved because the dignity of the people must be upheld. Wait, hold on, what? I mean, wait, you're politicizing this and playing the victim. You who are the president of the republic, the highest political authority, right? I am the victim, not the one murdered. Let's see.
He's still at the funeral and already playing the victim on Twitter. It's crazy. Yeah, crazy.
I mean, those kinds of reactions are just crazy. I mean, I never even imagined that Petro or his government could possibly have anything to do with it. Look, there are interest groups, especially drug traffickers and guerrilla groups. They view Miguel Uribe as an enemy due to his political positions. That's likely where the investigation should go and probably where it is. But when you read Petro say that, you think, wait, hold on.
Does it look suspicious? I mean,
explaining without being asked implies guilt.
Exactly, accusation. Isn't he speaking?
And you come out and say, hey, I have nothing to do with it, and I'm going to sue whoever is involved. I'm the victim, not the one murdered. If after 4 or 5 months it's already considered harassment and everyone is blaming you, then that's understandable. He hadn't even been dead for 24 hours. It's ridiculous. I wonder if it's just narcissism, always wanting attention. I don't know if it's just stupidity or if he's actually guilty of something. I don't know, I can't know, and most likely I'll never know. However, it's striking. Then, 2 days later, which is the funeral, he publishes a letter to Alvaro Uribe about the assassination of Miguel Uribe. They are not related, even though they have the same last name. There are many Uribes. Where Alvaro Uribe, who is also facing legal proceedings, they're trying to jail him for alleged corruption. I'm not sure, but he clearly saw himself as a politician, and he did. He points at Petro and says, hey, because of your speech, and Petro reacts. Once again, he goes all out. Let's see, by responding to someone under investigation, you amplify their voice and increase polarization. And in that scenario, while the funeral was taking place, it's really valuable to listen to the words of Miguel Uribe's father. Yes, he hints at the possibility that the government might have had some degree of responsibility. He handles it well, since it doesn't mean he pulled the trigger. But does this polarization originate from the presidency? And in a country with so many paramilitary groups, in a country with Colombia's history when the president was a guerrilla fighter? Damn, we need to tone it down. We have to be responsible with the words used by those in power. Petro is not just any person. And in the middle of that very moving, very symbolic speech, a new attack against Assembly member Triana is reported, and the most concerning part isn't even the attack itself. And then he releases the statement and says, hey, I've been asking you for more security for a year. I was just threatened last week, and here's the response where the government tells me no. And not only was they threatened, they list several assembly members threatened by drug trafficking groups. And the man was shot 8 or 9 times. The SUV was armored. Fortunately, it didn't get any worse, but you say, let's see if you already know the context of where you are right now. If there are specific threats, if there's a formal request, why the hell do they deny greater security detail? Yes.
When that happened, you would think, when what happened to Miguel Uribe happened, you would think, hey, now Colombia has armored all its politicians, right? At least the high-profile ones, or at least gave them protection, assigned them security and everything, because, hey, you don't want this to happen again, right? And weeks later, this happens. Unbelievable.
Now, there are 2 little things there, just to make it quick, about Colombia that I can't let go unnoticed either. And already in the
room now.
Yes, with the Venezuela situation. First, the territorial dispute it has with Peru and
this increase
of tensions caused by Peru. I don't know if yesterday
or the day before,
I don't remember well. He detained 2 Colombian people who were on this islet that has formed because of the change in the course of the Amazon River. Right? The riverbed. This island is mine, but the treaty says otherwise. On this side, so this side is mine. If the riverbed changes, well, that's not my fault. To me, it seems like a distraction, but tensions are rising. Has Peru already sent troops there? I'm not saying there will be armed conflict, but it's an issue in Peru's bilateral relationship. And Colombia, it's causing a lot of friction. Petro, with the issue of Venezuela, first of all, he makes a terrible statement which Maduro exploits very well, because basically he says we're going to coordinate the armies of Venezuela and Colombia because we are the great Colombia of Simón Bolívar. And what does Maduro say? Of course, brother, we are the same, and our militaries will work together to defend ourselves. And obviously, what does Maduro do? Well, he escalates it. All right. Then Petro backs down and says, no, no, no. In the fight against drug trafficking, he starts to tone it down a bit. But it's those kinds of foolish things that are putting Petro in a very complicated position. heading into the 2026 election, an election where we'll see if he seeks re-election, which is the most likely scenario. We'll see which candidate emerges. There's also a left-wing candidate, but I can't recall if Colombia allows re-election. But could there be a shift with Petro's administration mostly? Due to these issues that have further polarized things and his ongoing support for Nicolas. A final message from Colombia, which seemed very strong to me. Due to the symbolism, the ambassador arrives with the lawyer and Miguel Uribe's family at the funeral.
The Emperor of the United States, that's right, arrived at the
Funeral.
a very
Clear.
and,
Interference, because we also have to say it, just like the United States, they are getting involved in the politics of all Latin America. Yes. They already did it in the case of Alvaro Uribe, declaring that this is a political persecution, declaring that this is an issue that the left is pushing, that they are pushing. Petro essentially claims Alvaro Uribe is innocent of any wrongdoing. I don't know, and neither does the United States. They can guess or believe Trump has sympathies, but does that make it official? There is a huge gap, and the presence of the United States ambassador in the funeral of Miguel Uribe is a very strong political message. Nicolas Maduro must fall, yes, without a doubt. I mean, I'm very much in favor of him falling, no matter how. But be careful, I don't think they're doing it for justice. I don't think they're doing it. The United States is the champion that seeks the best, not at all. There is a political background, and we're seeing it, and it's getting stronger. And the fall of Nicolas Maduro could mean the fall of many other figures, for better or for worse. What problem do Latin Americans face? Let's see, let them tell us. Whether it's Colombia or Mexico or Honduras or Guatemala, which have been the most pointed out. Let them admit their drug trafficking ties. No one doubts it. We can't deny that. There's no moral clarity where we can say, no, that's not true. Our politicians are incapable of that. This is a political intervention, not because of a drug trafficking issue. No, really. Is there plenty of evidence of how the relationship between drug trafficking and politics has been, and in cases like Colombia, we must remember that paramilitary groups have always been closely linked, often aligning more with the left politically. Even where Petro comes from with the issue of drugs and how it has been a form of self-financing, it's something.
yes. And within all of this, there's a country we have to add, which is Ecuador with OBOA. I mean, what's happening there? What have you observed? A polarizing figure who does this as well, who constantly criticizes Andrés Manuel López Obrador a lot, but then does the same things that Andrés Manuel López Obrador used to do.
I'm calling the process that Ecuador is going through right now the Mexicanization of Ecuador, or the Obradorization of Oboa, because Oboa is not in a mandate. He introduces reforms, including biometric data. Does that sound familiar? Greater militarization? The military and the police have a sort of preemptive pardon. That's this whole militaristic structure under the pretext of the fight against drugs, against drug trafficking, and so on. They send these laws to an assembly that Novoa already controls, where the legislature approves everything for him. What happens is that different civil organizations go and file what would be like a type of injunction, seeking the suspension of these regulations. The Constitutional Court, which would be like the Supreme Court or something similar, issues a temporary suspension. In other words, it says, look, at first glance, these articles seem to violate guarantees human rights. What do you have to do? I suspend it while I analyze and decide whether or not it violates the Constitution. What does Novoa say? No, the magistrates, the constitutional judges, are stealing the citizens' peace. And he calls for a march. The president of the republic, the president of Ecuador, calls for a march against the constitutional court. Why? Because the court is doing its job. What is the job of the judicial branch? To have constitutional control over the executive and the legislative. You are the executive, you execute, but within a constitutional framework. And what if you go beyond that? My job is to stop you. Your legislative assembly creates laws, but if those laws go against human rights, my job is to stop you. And what if it's done in the most populist way? Novoa, like a march, just like Maduro did 1,000 times, like the marches that took place in the Zócalo. They put up big posters with the judges' faces saying on the sign, these are the ones who steal your peace. And what about the speech that Novoa's group is making? They say that crime is the judge's problem because the judges don't want laws to be made to put criminals in jail. Let's see. It's the same narrative that López Obrador used against the judiciary, but it goes even further. A public referendum is being called for December. It has 7 questions. I'll skip the ones that don't matter to me, like the casino or military base topics. One is removing the Citizen Participation Council. Are you familiar with eliminating citizen and autonomous councils?
Autonomous? Of course, yes.
We already saw that in Mexico with López Obrador. The reduction of assembly members, does that sound familiar? The elimination of deputies?
2.
Here it is. Ending political party funding. Sound familiar?
López Obrador?
Hey, everything. Impeaching constitutional judges wasn't López Obrador's approach. He used judicial reform, which is even worse. But Novoa and his team are using the same argument as López Obrador. Is there an assembly member? Castillo, be careful. He's a great debater, and I thought he was outstanding. He's a top populist demagogue who caught my attention by using a contrary example. I mean, we need to make these reforms so we don't end up like López Obrador and Claudia Sheinbaum. I honestly didn't know if I should laugh or cry.
I mean, they're going to do the same thing.
They're going to
No.
the same thing so they don't end up the same way.
It's
One is insane. It's crazy. What's happening in Ecuador seems to me like something really remarkable. Amanda Villavicencio, daughter of Fernando Villavicencio, who was the right-wing presidential candidate in Ecuador, he was murdered. And that's when Novoa comes in. So Villavicencio's daughter, who in theory, or as everyone would imagine, is she in sync with Novoa? She posted something I thought was excellent, saying, my father's fight was for freedom and democracy. We don't want to dictate 2 different paths. In other words, rubbing it in Novoa's face that the behavior Novoa is showing is exactly the same as what Correa did.
It's exactly
the same thing that, in theory, they were fighting against, not doing anything except that the difference is now they want to be in power. I insist it's basically the same thing that happened with López Obrador. López Obrador, in the speech that brought him to power, said we don't want militarization, we don't want the issue of biometric personal data. The internal security law is unconstitutional, yet he seizes power and continues those actions.
Of course, it is
hypocrisy at its finest. In Ecuador, we're seeing this Mexicanization of politics, and I think it's completely absurd and even sadder that there are groups who get carried away by the rhetoric. I know they're facing a complex security situation like we are in many countries, but that doesn't mean you should hand over all the power, much less your rights, to the government. It's extremely dangerous at best, and that was the same argument I used for the case of Mexico at best. Novo is a fallen angel from heaven with the best intentions. How can we be sure tomorrow's leader won't misuse that power?
Of course. Hey, hires. In 2 days, there will be elections in Bolivia, and they will be looking to elect a president, vice president, and Congress. Says Esteban Morales that they shouldn't vote or should cast a null vote. What's going on there? Have you seen anything about what's happening?
Yeah, it's fascinating because
just like
Ecuador is our recent past. Bolivia is our near future. Bolivia is holding a historic election. Evo Morales' party, founded in 2005, took power in 2006. The movement for socialism has been around for about 20 years, has been in power for 19 years, and hadn't lost a single election. And today, it seems almost impossible for them to even make it to the second round of the election. First of all, Bolivia is going through a very serious economic crisis. We have to remember that during Evo Morales' first term,
His party is the largest. I think it's called
and in social. I don't remember what the A stands for, but it's social. It had an economic boom. Colombia was a miracle. Sorry, Bolivia was called an economic miracle, but you have to see it in the right context because it wasn't just Bolivia. It was also Venezuela. It was also Mexico. It was also Brazil. That was this increase in commodities, as it was called. That was this period when natural resources increased to an impressive price, and Bolivia, because of its resources, did magnificently. Evo Morales' Minister of Economy was Luis Arce. Now, when Evo Morales leaves power, he puts Luis Arce as president. It is estimated that there will be continuity in political matters, but a series of disputes begin to arise among them. I'll separate it a bit here. One is the accusations and the investigations and legal proceedings that Evo Morales personally faces for crimes such as human trafficking and child abuse. Remember, he has a child with a 16-year-old girl. Look, that's called rape, and that's statutory rape. I mean, it's a crime that deserves jail time. But on the other hand, and what hurt Evo Morales most paradoxically, is that the reform which prohibits re-election for more than 2 terms, whether consecutive or not. Evo Morales went to the court arguing that his re-election, since it was not consecutive, should be allowed, and the Constitutional Court said, no, this is re-election, whether it is consecutive or not. That's when a major break occurs. It's also true that Evo Morales has been provoking political crises in different regions for several months now, especially where he has a stronger presence. In that context, already during the registration of candidates at the beginning, because they have already separated, Evo Morales is supporting the candidacy of a young man within his movement whose name is Androquino, while the Movement for Socialism Party, the official side, is proposing Castillo as their candidate. Evo Morales has a conflict with Androquino, and what happens is that Evo Morales starts to promote the null vote. So what happened to the political force that used to bring together Evo, Arce, and all these figures? This Bolivarian left-wing movement, as they call themselves, or the 21st century socialism, is now divided, and it's divided into 3. Evo Morales is calling for the null vote. Androquino has 5% of preferences, while Castillo has 1.2%.
according to this, Samuel Doria centro-right and Jorge Quiroga are the ones who would be leading the polls. And assuming there isn't a decisive win, it goes to a second round on October 19th and November 8th. By then, the new president should already be taking office, right? What is it that
Is expected? Is there going to be a runoff? Yes, of course. He was president before Evo Morales. Samuel Doria, a businessman, has also been a candidate before. He already participated in government, both of them. Also with Evo and Arce, is everything right-wing?
Yes, of course.
We can talk about a center-right and a right-wing in the
Programs of
government programs of both. I find it very interesting because they propose less state involvement. They already propose part of an economic policy, a shock policy, like saying, look, we need to stop subsidies right now. We need to reduce the state's involvement. We need to start privatizing many areas where the government has been failing in its administration as an economic measure, which is going to be very complicated because the same thing that happened with the Milli phenomenon is going to happen. Economically, it's great. I have no doubt this is the solution for the short, medium, and long term, but politically, it's going to be very complex because people will be affected. I mean, the right economic decisions affect groups of the population, and those groups, organized as they are in Bolivia, can be a powder keg. However, it's necessary. Here, much will depend on the political skill and ability of Bolivia's next president. And let's hope what is happening with Milei doesn't happen, who probably hasn't been able or willing to build bridges of communication with the affected sectors. Now, what the official polls are showing and what everyone is saying in Bolivia, in analysis programs, the journalists, it's going to be between Quiroga and Doria. That's where the presidency will be decided. The one next on the left, and the Crowner, is in 5th place. There were 10 candidates originally. Right now, that's it. Right now, that's it. There are 8 left, but it seems difficult for him to move from 5th to 1st in 2 days. But what's the question? Between blank votes, null votes, and undecided voters, they're talking about 30%, okay? There's a 30% there that could change the course of the election. Isn't it normal that undecided voters are the ones who could really change it? That's 13%, which is quite high. It's not like that 13% usually goes to just one candidate. Usually if they go and participate, it's spread among everyone with some major blocks. Usually in elections like this, where there are 2 clear front runners, the ones who usually get the undecided voters are the front runners. When someone goes to vote, very rarely do they vote for the one they think is going to lose.
They usually vote
for the one they think can win or the one they want to win. So undecided voters will likely choose that option. I saw an analysis that was very interesting, that the undecided voters are not in the favorable areas, not to the left, but in the right areas. That's interesting because I'd say the vote would go to the front runners, not the incumbents. Will it be a complicated election if the government makes it complicated? Luis Arce is distancing himself a lot. Regardless of politics or personal opinions, Evo Morales accuses Arce of planning to flee the country in November, claiming he'll hand it to the right. When Evo Morales says those kinds of things, it brings reassurance.
when Evo
Morales claims there's an imperialist plot, which reassures us. It means that at least he expects Luis Arce not to interfere in the election and allows this election to proceed democratically and freely. Hopefully it will. It's interesting because, as I said, Bolivia has had nearly 20 years, closely tied to Venezuela ideologically, not just geographically. The geopolitical map is starting to shift, and it leads us directly to another election that will be extremely important, which is the Chilean one. We have to remember that this year we also have the election in Chile and next year in Colombia. I greatly admire Chile for its democracy. The first social media movement through which changes are achieved or bring the public debate from social media with force. It wasn't the Arab Spring, as many people believe. It was the Penguin Revolution in 2005, where, with an educational reform promoted by Bachelet in her first term, high school kids from public schools went out to protest. They came to an agreement through Metroflog. I can't recall if it was MySpace or an earlier site, but imagine in 2005, middle schoolers aged 13-15 stopped an entire country. At first, everyone ignored them until the police broke them up. But the next day, the unions came out and said, hey, with the kids, right? I mean, come on, right? And more high schools joined in, and more high schools and more high schools, until it ended with a group of kids negotiating an education reform at the Casa Rosada with Michelle Bachelet. For me, that was beautiful and changed protest history. Chile held the first protest organized digitally, moving from online to the streets. If I recall correctly, though I'm not completely certain, that's probably the case. Boric himself came out of those protests. Or do you have other very important figures? Even if I strongly disagree with her views, like Camila Vallejo, leader of the Communist Assembly Party, but one of the main leaders came out of the Penguin Revolution. What do I do with all this? In Chile's political transitions have been very balanced. Hasn't Chile avoided the crises that other Latin American countries have faced? I think it has managed to maintain itself and has had a very high civic value.
Yes, yes.
This election, beyond the internal problems that Boric may bring, I think it has played a role, especially in foreign policy. Like with the very specific comments he has made about the Venezuelan dictatorship and him being from the left, I find them refreshing compared to what we are used to from this regional politics. He has been very clear in his positions and has been incisive about them. Well, now there's a candidate coming from the Communist Party who is much more attached to this Bolivarian policy, so to speak.
Well, she has clarified that she is not a communist. I mean, she doesn't.
She is a communist?
In any case, she says she's center left, but she does have support from
groups. That's what has been moderating the language, because if you look at how the language was before, it was much more aggressive, much more direct. And it has had a very high growth from how it started to how it is now. I think to a large extent it's been this strategy of moderating the language. Hopefully that's the case, because he feels it and believes it, and not just for marketing. And on the other hand, on the right, you have three candidates. So here the right has to be very smart if it wants to compete. And how is it going to compete? In Chile, a runoff election is very likely. However, according to the polls, keep in mind, they're just polls. Polls are not reality. If the right-wing candidates unite, they could reach 50+1 and thus avoid a runoff election. To the growth that this left-wing person, whose name escapes me, has been having, well, honestly, he could beat them by a wide margin if the right wing is shattered. It's like Bolivia, but reversed. Here, the left wing is united. A left wing that can go strong, and the right wing, which is the one that's down, which is the one that would have to come together. To fight or to be able to fight, well, you have three candidates, maybe even the most extreme candidates for many people. This Kaiser, who is a libertarian, who really has no chance of winning, I think he would be the first to step down if his discourse is truly genuine. And from this need to bring change to Latin America and the region, to have a closer relationship with Argentina rather than Venezuela or Colombia, and be in sync. So he has to step down. Isn't this common in other elections? I don't think that's true, but we need to watch the election closely. Especially if what seems likely to happen in Bolivia actually happens on Sunday. And finally, on the election issue, I mean, aside from Costa Rica, but Costa Rica, just like in Chile, seems very stable to me. Not many surprises are expected. There's also an election in Honduras, but I think Colombia's is more important. I mean, these are degrees of influence of the Bolivarian left that are being contested. I mean, it's Bolivia, it's Chile, and it's Colombia next year, and then comes Brazil. It's like closing the pincers. Given this, let me return to the United States. To me, that largely explains this blatant and aggressive interference that Donald Trump is having. Now, if there's an electoral issue, if there's a political issue, a geopolitical issue, of course, a figure like Donald Trump would prefer to have someone like Milei to negotiate with. Are there 8 Noboa, 8 Bukele, or what he thinks will be 8 Bukele, 8 Noboa, or 8 Milei? Rather than having figures like Lula da Silva who go and say no to him, who go and put a stop to him. That's the situation we're involved in Latin America. The case of Brazil, I just touch on it very briefly. The issue of the Cuban doctors seems very symbolic and very significant to me. But above all, because it's a message not only for Brazil, but for many countries, including Mexico, I think there's plenty of information, not just from today, not just from Donald Trump, but from all times, about how these Cuban doctors are used as slave labor, how it's a way for the Cuban dictatorship to get resources, and how they're also used for indoctrination. And it's something that has been denounced not just today. The issue of Cuban doctors has existed as long as I can remember. But now sanctions are being applied against politicians in Brazil, precisely because of the implementation of the program Doctor, which is the program that uses these doctors to bring health services to communities within Brazilian territory. The same program Mexico has used since 2020, if I recall correctly.
Exactly. Hey, Gears, so just to wrap up, I don't know if you'd like to comment on what they're doing. I think it's a judge who's put in, well, this document, let me put it here on the screen.
Judge Reyes Rodriguez of the Electoral Tribunal.
Exactly, it's this document. I don't know if it's on the screen. If you could tell us, what is this document about?
The issue of judicial reform. A series of challenges are raised regarding the election, specifically about the voting process. As those who have followed the channel or have listened to us in other talks will remember, we've talked quite a bit about this judicial reform. The voting, which was an effective 9% turnout, the winning candidate for minister gets 5 million votes. We're talking about a very small number again, but a series of cheat sheets were distributed, cheat sheets that told you who to vote for. In the results, between the main cheat sheet or the one that was distributed the most, what was on the cheat sheet and the results were exactly the same. That's for ministers, but what if you take it to the electoral court and to the court of justice? The one from the Inquisition, as we call it. Everyone, the accordion results are unchanged.
The same, yes, yes. Here a woman is speaking. Manipulation. National manipulation where they said, look, vote for these people because they are the ones that specifically benefit Morena. And those are exactly the ones who won.
So you understand the scale. It was, I think it was 50-something times easier to win the lottery than for those results to happen. It's statistically impossible that everything that was on the cheat sheet exactly as it was on the main cheat sheet because there were several
cheat sheets that he could pull that off.
This ruling only concerns the minister's issue. That's just one part, okay? What are the elements that this judge uses to determine that there was electoral fraud? They presented these cheat sheets, over 3,000 copies, as evidence. There are more than 300 videos showing how the cheat sheets were distributed, how people were given instructions, how people were taken to vote. There are photographs, audio recordings, and so on. What this ruling seeks, if we stick strictly to the law, is to annul the election and have the election repeated. But besides that, and does it state that in the same ruling? That preventive and punitive measures are taken. It was the legislature's responsibility to prevent this from happening again, since it resulted from flaws in the original reform. It's a reform designed for this. It's a reform designed so that people don't participate. It's an absurd reform, no matter how you look at it. What this magistrate intends is for this to be annulled and for the election to be repeated. Sadly, it's something that's not going to happen. And sadly, it's not going to happen. Because with the current composition of the Electoral Tribunal, we already know how they're going to vote. It's just like what happened at the INE. I don't know if you remember. There were also 5 councillors who were against validating the election, but there were 6 who said yes. And the 6, we already knew who would say yes and who would say no. A judge should be known by his rulings. You have magistrates like Reyes Rodriguez, who sometimes votes in favor of what the government wants and sometimes votes against what the government wants. That's called independence. But you have other magistrates who have systematically voted for whatever the government puts forward and whatever the government wants. Really, should I go that far back? Year 2022, 2023. The new magistrates of the Electoral Tribunal had to be appointed There, Adán Augusto, who was López Obrador's Secretary of the Interior, had an audio leaked with the Morena senators where he says, look, in López Obrador's ideal world, there won't be appointments of electoral magistrates, and for the 2024 election, there were no electoral magistrates, meaning there was no such appointment. There was an incomplete tribunal. 2 magistrates from the states where the magistrates are aligned with the regime, and they are the ones who start making these decisions and votes always in the same direction of supporting the regime. That's why this won't be approved. The vote is Wednesday. However, it will be very interesting to watch the session, to see this assembly and hear the positions and arguments they will present. Those who vote against this project modify it and decide to validate the election. What's this useful for? Mainly history. The ministers who will take office on September 1st have no legitimacy. They are ministers who came to power through an electoral fraud that is fully documented. 5-line councillors stated this, and surely, and sorry, we already know that the draft ruling from the Electoral Tribunal reaffirms this.
And this document, as we call it, Gires, this document is
a draft ruling.
Well, this draft ruling says at one point, it says, the convergence of the specific and general grounds that have been established creates a scenario of nullity that is based on multiple independent but converging legal grounds. And here come the points. Specific cause, improper use of public or private funding, and general cause, a violation of constitutional principles. And then, well, more information comes after that, but then to begin with, the fact that this is being discussed officially within the court is extremely important.
This is now recorded in history. It's about 470 pages, if I remember right. That's roughly how the ruling is organized. I mean, don't think it's just saying, oh, look, there was fraud here. It's over 400 pages of legal analysis and study. A thorough one that's carried out. But above all, is this going to serve as a precedent or background in international instances? Mexico is facing an abnormal situation. This level of concentration isn't normal. Let me clarify. That's why what's happening in Ecuador is so concerning, because they're following the same path that Mexico is following. And this isn't good, whether you're on the right or the left, and it's not good for anyone.
Yes, because it disrupts the balance of power. Here, you're assuming that this evolves to where at the international level they attempt a legal move. What's the situation? Or what is the...
Look, this may sound harsh, but sanctions on Mexico should start, and the international community must pay attention and hold Mexico accountable to prevent normalization. I mean, look, it sounds horrible, but Mexico really needs to be at the center of international attention now. I understand conflicts like those in Ukraine and Israel and others. Much more violent or aggressive behaviors are going unnoticed. A lot of issues, I mean, the same thing that's happening in Ecuador. I mean, the United Nations already spoke out. That's good. Amnesty International spoke out. That's good, just like they did at the time with Mexico. But it doesn't go any further than that. We need to increase the measures and put pressure on these kinds of autocratic figures. Whether it's Novo or Claudia Sheinbaum. And is this precedent going to help with that? Why? Because the same judges are telling you and showing you with their rulings, and they're telling you in what is presented in international organizations, how did the court disintegrate? What are the current courts like? Where did they originate? Whom do they follow? And what have their rulings been? I mean, there's a narrative being told about the events and about how democracy has been eroded and how there was an institutional dismantling point by point. This shows we are no longer in a democracy and that Mexico is no longer a republic. I see only one politician in Mexico who gets this, and it's not because he's good. It's Alito Moreno. Alito Moreno just presented his case to the Organization of American States. Remember, he is undergoing a process to remove his immunity. He legally demonstrates that the case is either poorly put together or that there really wasn't any evidence in what he's being accused of. At that moment, that process to remove his immunity falls apart. Then the thing with Adán Augusto happens. A case was opened against the Partido Acción Nacional president and another against Alito Moreno. You can't judge someone twice for the same act. Hito Moreno is holding on to that. I'm not sure if the preliminary investigation integration is the same, but what he's holding on to is that he's going to international bodies and saying, look, I'm a political persecuted. Look, here it is. Where they tried to strip my immunity, I prove my innocence here. Here is the Ana Augusto case. This is when they resumed persecuting me for crimes I'd already been tried for. But it doesn't stop there. And on September 1st, there are no longer independent courts in Mexico, and there aren't any because of this, and this. And he starts to pick up the thread from how the approval happens. He'll likely compile the file with whatever is decided, both on Wednesday in the full session of the tribunal and on Monday in the Supreme Court, which also goes to a vote. They're also going to dismiss a series of challenges there, or at least that's how it looks. Yes, I think it's mainly law-related because of the lack of legal standing. However, we'll have to see what happens on Monday. We'll have to see what happens on Wednesday. My hopes are almost non-existent on this matter, but of course it's going to be important and newsworthy to follow the behavioral thread. From how the reform happened up to this point, which would be the final stage and would be concluded on September 1st.
Well, we'll have to talk about it next week then, along with who knows how many other topics. But what about Putin? Is he attending, and will the Bolivia issue be covered? At least the first round of voting. So that's definitely going to be interesting because there will be more information about what's happening in Israel and the whole Middle East, since there are so many topics. Gears, I think Serbia has been similar. There were protests this week, like the ones there, right? Yes. I mean, they're already fed up with that president, and basically they're asking him to resign. We have to remember that in Serbia, they apparently used this sonic weapon against the population during the previous protests. Who knows? Not sure if they'll do it this time, but it's intense. Shaz, how's your channel going? Good. I mean, we're just getting started. I'm uploading content, Telly, yes, Telly.
Right now, I share them with you out of affection and love for my community. Well, and to a large extent, the channel has been thanks to the push you've given me when you told me to start recording and stop making excuses. Right now, my intention is to get used to speaking. I mean, I know people here know me that I talk a lot, but it's not the same as having someone to talk to and someone to be with. Getting feedback, turning on the camera, and speaking can sometimes be challenging.
Hey, your channel will appear in the comments for people to subscribe to the community that's interested. And well, is this your second or third week with the channel? I'm not sure. I've been
posting
every day.
I create short capsules about notes that catch my attention and seem important to me. Then Saturdays, we do a podcast that I can call it Cratology, where
I have a very
good friend who, besides being my partner, is a friend since we were 14 years old. He taught literature and greatly influenced my love for books when I was 13 or 14. Me, with a box of books like that, he told me to start reading. And from there, I discovered authors that blew my mind. Maybe authors I wasn't ready to read yet, but later I picked them up again. And tomorrow we have an interesting episode. Is a story by Cortázar called Taken House. Okay. It's a very, very short story. It's a story that's just 2 pages long, really small, but it has an impressive symbolic weight. Yesterday, we spent 75 minutes discussing a short story. It's very interesting because it has a lot of political weight. In Cratologia, what we try to do is talk about literature and connect it to the topic of power. That's why it's called Cratologia, and we bring it to the present day. In the first episode, we talked about Orwell and about the Orwellian, which is our reality right now, compared to the novel Animal Farm, the past. We did it about a story by Isaac Asimov, which is The Last Question, which is basically a universal generative pre-trained transformer chat. So it's also super interesting. And what about this one? The interpretation, at least the one I give it, And I base it a bit on what Cortázar himself said, is how dictatorships or these autocratic governments keep advancing. And society is very passive, and it has always been very passive. And we don't realize how they keep invading our spaces and our spheres of rights. When it's already too late and there's nothing left to do but leave the house. It's a spectacular story. It's a fantasy story. It's a story that can be interpreted in 1,000 ways. As horror, you can interpret it with aliens. You can interpret it psychologically. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. Cortázar, well, I think he's one of the most famous writers Latin America has produced. He's an Argentine who went into exile, self-exiled to Peru. The time when he wrote it is also very important. But anyway, I won't say too much in case you want to check it out yourselves. Tomorrow at noon, it's already scheduled to happen. And every day, well, we're there discussing it. I'm going to keep doing different experiments until I finally consolidate the channel's format.
Great, Jerez. So we'll be paying attention to what you write, to what you'll comment tomorrow about this, Cortázar. It will be very interesting. Well, also to read, since you told us which story it is, find and read it before watching the video. You can read it in 5 minutes. It's really great, and that's it. Gil, we're talking, we're still having a conversation. A lot of things are coming this week. Next Friday, we'll be here, right? Talking with you. Surely.
1,000 new topics at the pace we're going, right? This world is already pretty crazy, isn't it?
We covered a lot today. Let's see how next week goes. Always a pleasure. Jonas, thank you very much. See you later.
No, man, thank you. Greetings to the community. Awesome. Thanks.